Hi, my name is Paul, and today I'm upgrading my pedalboard. I've not done this before, so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about it and share my experience with you. My current pedalboard was built for me by Westside Music on Denmark Street in London, where I originally purchased the pedal train. When I designed the pedalboard originally, I wanted to use it to make different types of music. For example, one of the things I wanted to do was play my bass guitar, split the signal, have one of the paths go up an octave so that I could play Royal Blood style guitar riffs. However, for what I want to use the pedalboard for now, which is to focus on ambient guitar music, its current setup really isn't working for me. One of the main issues I found playing ambient guitar music is that each section requires different pedal settings, and switching between the different pedals and clicking half a dozen switches and changing parameters using knobs while you're playing the guitar is really not practical. Therefore, one of the main objectives of upgrading my pedalboard is to automate as much as possible so that I can switch between presets using a MIDI controller. So, before we talk about my new pedalboard, let's look at the existing signal chain of my current pedalboard in some more detail. The first pedal on my old pedalboard is this Electro-Harmonix switchblade. This has one input and two outputs, and it allows you to switch between either output or play both outputs at the same time. The first output goes into this Electro-Harmonix bass distortion pedal. This then goes into my bass guitar amp. The second output from the switchblade goes into this MXR custom shop compressor. From the custom shop compressor, it goes into this Ernie Ball VP Junior volume pedal. The tuner output from the volume pedal goes into this MXR talk box if I want to play the talk box. The main output from the volume pedal goes into this Electro-Harmonix Micropog octave pedal. And if I'm playing my bass guitar, I use this pedal to shift the signal up by one octave. From the Micropog pedal, we go to the Boss Harmonist pedal. This allows you to add a harmony in a given key. You can also do whammy style effects. However, I don't find myself using this pedal very often, so I've decided to take it off my pedal board. Similarly, the hot tone wah pedal is a great sounding wah, and it can also be used as a volume pedal or an expression pedal. However, I've got very big feet and I find it awkward to use compared to my VP Junior volume pedal. However, I think it would be a really great pedal if you needed to squeeze a small wah pedal onto a small pedal board. The next pedal in the chain is the Germanium Big Muff. This is a combined overdrive and distortion pedal. However, I found it really hard to consistently find tones that I like, so I've decided to take this off my pedal board. The next pedal in the chain is the MXR 4-bore metal. I really love this pedal, but it's a bit of a one-trick pony. It's a great pedal, but it's really only good at doing high gain metal distortion. From the 4-bore metal, we move over to the Strymon El Capitan tape delay pedal. From the El Capitan, we go into the Strymon Mobius, which is a multi-effect modulation pedal. From the Mobius, we go into the Strymon Timeline delay pedal. From the Strymon Timeline, we go to the Strymon Big Sky reverb pedal. From the Big Sky reverb pedal, we go to the BBE Sonic Stomp pedal. This is a great pedal that enhances your final guitar sound at the end of your signal chain. I don't fully understand how it works, but it does some frequency adjusted time alignment that helps your guitar tone really cut through the mix, and it helps pick out harmonics. The final pedal in my chain is this Boss loop station. It's the first looper I ever bought, but it's really limited for ambient guitar music where you need to have many stacked loops. Underneath my existing pedalboard is a Voodoo Labs Mondo power supply. However, this power supply alone is not going to be enough to power all the new pedals on my pedalboard. Therefore, the first job that I need to do today is to add a second power supply. And I've chosen the Voodoo Labs digital power supply. I need a power supply that has a high current output in order to work with my Strymon pedals, the Eventide pedal and the Boomerang looper pedal that I'm going to add to my new board. While I'm underneath the pedal board, I'm also going to fit guitar input and two jack outputs that I can plug into my audio interface. This way I'll keep the cables nice and neat and tidy on my new pedal board. So before I'm going to start drilling into my pedal train, the first thing I need to do is to remove the pedals that are currently on my board. I've measured out where I want the new power supply to be by using the extender cable from the Mondo to the new digital power supply. So I'm now going to drill some marker holes in place. Now that I've drilled marker holes, I need to drill some proper holes that the tapered screws will fit into. Obviously here it's better to drill holes that are too small that you can then make larger rather than holes that are too big. The next job is to fit this Best-tronics patch panel on the right side of my board. Again, drilling holes for the tapered screws. I've finished installing the Best-tronics patch panel. The extender cable from the Mondo goes nicely along to the new digital pedal power supply. Everything is nice and flush, none of the holes are showing. Okay, now that we've finished the work under the pedal train, installing the new power supply and the audio patch panel, the next thing to do is to put all the pedals on the board, including the new ones which I need to put Velcro on, in the places where we want them, to ensure that our power cables are long enough to reach the boards. We have some flexibility with the audio cables because I'm using George L cables which can always be cut to length. After a lot of experimenting, I've decided where I'd like each pedal to go. I've made some paper templates of each pedal and I've marked the power and the audio inputs and outputs on each. This way I can turn the pedal board over to install the cables without damaging the pedals. I've started with the power cables which I've attached to the paper templates with sellotape to ensure that the cables are the correct lengths before I neatly cable tie them under the pedal train. Getting the power right has proved to be one of the biggest challenges upgrading my pedal board. Different outputs provide different currents and different voltages, and some pedals require a different cable to reverse the polarity. For example, the specification of the Boomerang Looper says that it needs at least 700 milliamps, 9 volts to run on a DC power supply. When I first installed it, I tried to run it at 800 milliamps, 9 volts DC using a current doubler cable. It didn't work and I believed the pedal was faulty, so I returned it to Boomerang in Texas. After several weeks talking with Jeff at Boomerang Support, he told me that they'd moved their manufacturing to a new factory. The new batch of rectifiers performed slightly differently and I managed to get the pedal working if I ran it at 12 volts DC instead of 9 volts as was originally specified. Now that I've wired up all the power cables on my pedal board, I'm going to test each one individually using my guitar and amplifier to ensure they're all being powered correctly. Before I start to measure and cut the George L audio cables, there are a couple of other cabling jobs that I'd like to do first. As I mentioned earlier, one of the objectives of upgrading my pedal board is to automate as much as possible. I've chosen the disaster area DMC6 to do this because it can control the presets on 6 different independent MIDI channels. The first MIDI channel is used by this POG 2 pedal. However, Electro Harmonics do not manufacture this pedal with MIDI, so I had to get it converted to support MIDI by a company in the Czech Republic called Micro Designen. This allows me to switch between the 8 different presets from a MIDI controller. The reason that I felt it was important to automate the control of the POG 2 was not just to select presets for different octaves, but also because it has an attack parameter, which is really useful for ambient guitar swells. It works a bit like an automatic volume pedal that removes the initial sound when you pluck a string. The The second MIDI channel is used by this Chase Bliss warped vinyl. It does not have a DIM MIDI input. However, it is possible to control it by sending MIDI from one of the multi-jack outputs on the DMC6. The third channel is the Eventide H9 Max. The fourth, fifth and sixth channels are used by the Strymon Mobius, the Timeline and the Big Sky. The first job that I want to do today is to wire up one of my VP Junior volume pedals to work as an expression pedal with the DMC6. This means that it's going to be sending the MIDI expression input to all my MIDI devices at the same time. However, by configuring each MIDI preset, it should be possible to assign the expression pedal to only one pedal at a time. For example, I can now use it as a replacement for my wah pedal because it could control the filter settings on the Strymon Mobius, or alternatively, it could control one of the parameters in the H9 algorithms. To convert a volume pedal into an expression pedal, we need to use an insert cable. We connect the stereo end into the expression input on the DMC6. The ring end, which is the send end, goes into the input of the volume pedal. And the return end, or the tip end, goes into the output of the volume pedal. The second job is wiring up the El Capitan. It has one input and two outputs. By default, the input is mono, but it can be changed internally by changing a jumper inside the pedal. Using this splitter cable, I can now connect the two outputs from the H9 into one single stereo input on the El Capitan. This will enable me to capture things like the warped vinyl and the H9, which are earlier in the chain, onto a stereo tape loop in sound on sound mode. And on this pedal, I can make this deteriorate nicely over time. However, I've kept the El Capitan in the same position on my chain before the Strymon Mobius, and this is so that I can do some pre-modulation delay, as well as doing post-modulation delay after the Mobius with the Timeline. Now I'm ready to start wiring up the audio cables on my pedal board. This is going to be the most time-consuming part of the build. If I've done my maths right, I'm going to need 5 straight adapters and 37 L-shape adapters. However, I've got lots of adapters and cables left over from my previous pedal board, so I'm going to try and reuse as many of these as I can. Assembling each adapter can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to walk you through how I do it. I'm using a scalpel to cut my cables. The reason I'm using a scalpel and not a pair of wire cutters is that I don't want to squish the end of the cable. I'm gently rolling and cutting through the cable so that I get a nice round cut. Next, I'm going to push the cable into the centre of the adapter, applying a little bit of force and giving it half a twist so that it makes contact with the needle inside. Then I'm going to screw on the cap by hand. As I tighten up the screw actually cuts through the rubber and makes contact with the wire braid inside the cable. Once I've finished tightening up by hand, I like to test it with a cable tester. I purchased this one on Amazon for £25. I mean, it's going to save me a lot of time. That cable looks good. Once I'm happy with the cable, I can tighten it up with a pair of pliers. And there we go, one patch cable. Now that I've completed wiring up the audio cables, the next stage is to install the MIDI cables. I've measured the lengths that I'll need, and I've ordered these Best-tronics MIDI cables from the Disaster Area website, including the multi-jack cable for the Chase Bliss warped vinyl. Now that I have installed all the power, audio and MIDI cables under the pedal board, I can start to replace the paper templates and connect up all the pedals on the pedal train. Another tip that I found helpful is that it's possible to change the angle of these Best-tronics MIDI cables by unscrewing the adapter and rotating the plug. I found this helpful for the H9 and the DMC6 because the dim sockets on these pedals are the other way around to the other pedals. My new pedal board is complete. I think it looks good. All the pedals, apart from the boomerang looper, now use the 3PD type foot switches. All the pedals are true bypass and each pedal has its own isolated power cable. Thanks for watching. I hope that some of you found this video useful. In my next video, I'll walk you through the features of my new pedal board and I'll show you each pedal in more detail. Bye for now.